It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Monday, June 8th, 2026. The time is 6:40 p.m., and I am in Miami-Dade County, Florida. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. The topic of today's lecture is founding principles versus future realities. And I would like to begin by invoking my First Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution to make any assertion that I feel is needed in this or any lecture, and that includes written materials. Also, you'll notice, ladies and gentlemen, that I have a proclivity to invoke the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, state constitutions, civil rights, human rights, etc., when I speak on matters concerning clandestine gang stalking and similar matters. That is because I consider it to be an express violation of all of these things. And quite frankly, you would be hard pressed, ladies and gentlemen, to find anyone in the national security or intelligence community in this country or the armed services community in this country that could convince me that it's okay to mark U.S. citizens as cannon fodder for other U.S. citizens who are constantly in pursuit of their target with no intention other than to gather data on him and confront him using covert communication mechanisms day after day after day. I think, ladies and gentlemen, part of this experiment that's being done, we're going to call it Project Gang Stalking. And that's what we're going to start calling it from now on, too. We're going to call it Project Gang Stalking. And the reason we're going to start calling it Project Gang Stalking is because, like Project MK Ultra, it is drawn up, it is plotted, planned, and it is pieced together by government auxiliaries, plain and simple. And like Project MK Ultra, Project Gang Stalking has roots in the control of human behavior, the control of human movements, the control of a person's trajectory through this mortal world, a control over what a person experiences, and a control over a person's perception of the world around them. Now, when we talk about the nuances or the intricacies of gang stalking, the little stuff that stalkers do to make the experience as unpleasant as it could be, those silent weapons don't compare to the grand scheme of gang stalking. Okay, the grand scheme of it all is eventually population control. All right, eventually this program is supposed to reach a capacity to where essentially segment A of the population, all right, the deputized segment, the segment that knows gang stalking, the segment that practices gang stalking, the segment that goes out into the world with no reason other than to find targets to use signals on, so other stalkers who know the signaling mechanism will descend on them like a pack of wild animals. Okay, eventually this program was supposed to get to the point where, using similar coded communication mechanisms, similar hidden governmental protocols and procedures, and similar hidden methods of control, it would eventually get to the point where segment A of the population, those who know and practice gang stalking, would be able to decide who gets the opportunity to live in this world at all. Okay, and who gets the opportunity to have a life, period. You see, it's ultimately going to boil down to who in the United States is worthy to live at all. It's not, see, presently, and when I say live, we're not talking about murder. We're not talking about murder, okay? We're not talking about gang stalkers going around killing people with impunity. When I say that eventually this program was supposed to get to the point where gang stalkers were going to be able to dictate who gets to exist on this earth, we're not talking the present. You see, gang stalking is still a baby. You see, it's still an infant. We're only seeing the early stages of this program as it is. I needed to jump on top of it quickly because nits make lice. Okay? If you were to ask a member of the Jewish community, for example, if you knew that Hitler would go on to commit a massacre against your people, and you had an opportunity to get in a time machine and go back to the late 1800s and prevent Adolf Hitler from ever being born, would you? I think most people, if not all people in the Jewish community, would say yes. If you were to ask members of the Japanese community, right? Knowing what you know about the results of World War II, if you had an opportunity to get in a time machine and go back to 1945 or 1943 and warn the Japanese government that the U.S. had an atom bomb, that it was getting ready to drop on Hiroshima, would you? I think most people in the Japanese community would say to that, yes. If you were to say to the Armenian community or members of that community, if you had, knowing what you know about the interactions between the Armenians and the Turks, if you could get in a time machine and go back in time to the turn of the turn of the 20th century, would you warn the Armenians that a massacre against their people was imminent? I think they would say yes. All right, if you were to explore deeper historical matters, and you were a member of the British community, and somebody were to offer you an opportunity to get in a time machine and go back in time to the Revolutionary War, Would you warn the British Crown or the monarchy of Britain of every move that these young rebel American settlers were going to make? I think a lot of the members of the British community would say, yeah, I would. All right, let's keep going. If you had an opportunity, let's say you're an Anglo-Saxon Irish American, knowing what you know about the American Indian Wars, if you could get in a time machine and go back to the year, let's say 1750, right? The American Indian War was very hot back then, very hot. If you could get in a time machine and go back in time and warn the settlers, knowing what you know about history, what was to transpire, would you? I think a lot of Americans would say yes. And on the flip side, members of the Native American community in this country, many of them wouldn't hesitate to get in a time machine and go back in time to warn the Native American Indians as to what the settlers' next moves were going to be. You see, people have a distinct capacity to root for their own kind in conflicts. Okay? When you think about gang stalking, you have people of all different backgrounds. There are so many different backgrounds of people that practice clandestine gang stalking. I mean, here in Miami-Dade County, there's more of one demographic than others. So if you're a targeted individual, you're going to see more of that demographic participating in your gang stalking campaign than demographics that appear in other parts of the country. But when you talk about us versus them in a gang stalking discussion, who is the us and who is the them? Okay, if you knew what you knew, if put it like this, if knowing now what you know, ladies and gentlemen, about clandestine gang stalking, if you could go back in time and warn somebody about its effect, who would you warn? Would you warn the targeted individuals and let them know, hey, this is what's about to start happening, this is how it works? Or would you warn the gang stalkers? Say, hey, targeted individuals are getting wise to what you all are doing. Here's what they're saying about you. You see, it's hard to distinguish in the gang stalking conversation who is us and who is them. Who is side A and who is side B? You see, as of right now, all we have in the gang stalking discussion are gang stalkers versus targeted individuals. But from what I've observed, ladies and gentlemen, gang stalkers come from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. I'm talking the full spectrum of socioeconomic backgrounds and demographics. Targeted individuals, as far as I've gathered, are the same. They come from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. So what divides a gang stalker from a targeted individual, aside from the fact that one side, the gang stalkers, use covert communications mechanisms to point out, pester, harass, disrupt, and yes, attack side B, which are the targeted individuals. Okay? The us versus them mentality in gang stalking is difficult to decode because both the targets and the stalkers themselves come from a variety of different backgrounds, you see? And it's difficult to just look at somebody and say, you know what, that person's a stalker, or just look at another person and say, you know what, that person's a targeted individual. You see, it's difficult. You actually have to monitor and watch closely the way a person acts in public towards other people and around other people to make that determination. Okay? But here's where the us versus them lies, because a lot of gang stalkers don't know they're gang stalkers. They think they've tapped into a cool, neat, socially acceptable communication mechanism that gives them control over the American experience. All right, and target individuals are just kind of sitting here looking around like, who are all these disgusting weirdos? They keep popping up in my immediate vicinity in synchronized methods and in a synchronized capacity, just causing problems wherever they go. I mean, what gives? What's the criteria? You can't go on Craigslist and sign up to become a gang stalker. You can't go to your local police station and say, you know what, Mr. Officer, I want to be a targeted individual. Can you please enter my name in a database or something to where I can experience gang stalking myself? It doesn't work like that. You have to be placed into this program by somebody somewhere. And once you're placed in it, now gang stalkers know where to find you and how to act towards you when they find you. But they found you through communication mechanisms. Some gang stalkers wear earpieces. Some gang stalkers use hand signals. Some gang stalkers use a combination of the above. Some stalkers use verbal commands and vehicular maneuvers. Some stalkers use other communicative methods like symbols and gestures and other cues to locate and descend upon targets. Okay? If you're a targeted individual, you're not exactly a part of any group. You're not exactly a part of any cabal. You're not a part of any system. You're just kind of waking up every day, living your life in the way that suits you. And chances are multiple times a day you're going to run into these people in various capacities, and that's whether you drive or not. If you drive an automobile, you're gonna run into vehicular stalkers, which are they use some sort of a communication mechanism on the road to contain and disrupt a person's driving experience, oftentimes causing accidents and making it very dangerous for a targeted individual to drive. And then on the flip side of that, if you're a target individual and you're a person that uses public transportation, you're going to encounter stalkers on your public transportation, whether it's a metro rail of some kind or a city bus or something to that effect. You're going to encounter stalkers multiple times a day, and they are being signaled onto the exact metro bus that you're on. And when they get on that metro bus, they've already been pre-notified as to who they're supposed to sit next to, or who they're supposed to pester, or who they're supposed to fling germs at, or who they're supposed to get in the way of. Stalkers know this stuff ahead of time before they get on the bus. All right, and they're not sending stalkers, okay? Liaisons are not sending stalkers onto city buses to pester targets by theirself. Okay, there'll be multiple stalkers on the bus, so that there's sort of a nice padding or a nice cushion and a nice presence of fellow stalkers on the bus. In case the TI gets angry, there'll be witnesses against the TI. So it's not just one stalker getting on the bus, it's several stalkers getting on the bus, oftentimes at different stops, so that they can watch each other operate, with impunity. And it isn't just that, ladies and gentlemen. The latest tactic that these stalkers are using is one of what I like to call fake, derived, or illusionary control. You got stalkers that are now attempting to make it look as if they're telling targeted people what to do, and that the targeted people are obeying them. Okay, that's a psychological tactic that's being used. You got stalkers trying to prove to third parties that they have control over a targeted individual's movements. So what they'll do is they'll monitor a target for a number of days, and once they see where a target is likely to go, where they're likely to hang out, or perhaps where they like to eat, or perhaps where a target enjoys recreation or leisure time, they got it to where stalkers now are acting like they're pointing targeted people to go to places that they're already headed to. All right, let's say every morning at 7:30, a targeted individual goes to a McDonald's, then they go sit outside at a local park and feed ducks or watch the lake, right? They'll basically surveil you for a number of days or weeks, and once they determine that that is your pattern, that you are going to wake up at 7, you'll be out of the house by 7:30, you're going to get in your car, you're going to drive to McDonald's, you're going to get a bite to eat, then you're going to go to the park. Let's say these stalkers that you have want to make it look like to a third party that they're pointing you around or directing you or telling you what to do. They'll find out where you're already headed, and then they'll start flinging signals around so other stalkers can see the signals. And when you go in the direction of the park, which you're already headed to, they'll start flinging signals around from a distance, and it looks like you're obeying their signal, or it looks like you're headed to the park because they told you to go to the park. And it makes it look to another stalker, okay, we got this down pat, we got it together, that's a fellow stalker, that's a target. It looks like that stalker just told that target to walk into a park and the target obeyed. That means we stalkers have control, power, and authority over these targets, right? It's a morale booster. It's meant to look as if stalkers are pointing targeted people around. All right, I actually just had that happen not 20 minutes ago when I was headed to the park that I'm in now. I had some stalker kind of appear out of nowhere, which is what they do, not on a whim, but on a signal. And he started throwing all these funky signals and gestures around to make it look like he was pointing me into the park where I was supposed to be, when I was headed to the park anyhow. How did he know I was headed to the park? Because I've been surveilled heavily, and they got my movements down pat, and they know when I'm in a certain area where I tend to go. So when I'm on my way to where I'm going, they attempt to make it look as if they're the ones directing me, and they're doing it in front of other stalkers to make it look like I'm subservient to them. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, no one's called gang stalkers, liaisons, and their operatives useful idiots more than I have. If a guy calls you a useful idiot, do you think he's taking orders from you? Stalkers, do I look like I'm taking orders from you? No. I've decoded you, I've figured you out, and I'm exposing your domestic terrorism to the entire world. I think you all are in denial right now. And you don't want to believe you've been figured out, but you have. What you all do is not much dissimilar to what happened in East Germany with the Zersetzung that was placed on the lives of East German citizens. What you guys do is right on par with that. And what you do is right on par with Project MK Ultra. It all follows the same protocol and procedure. Some citizens get a normal existence, other citizens get a disrupted existence. Some citizens get a clear path to prosperity. Some citizens get held in place by destructive forces that prevent them from attaining prosperity at all. Some citizens are afforded their constitutional rights, and other citizens have their rights stripped of them for this reason or that. It's the exact same foundational approach that the Stasi took to Zersetsa. It's the same kind of approach that the U.S. Army and the CIA took to Project MKUltra. Now you got Project Gang Stalking, and you think that it's cute that you're perpetrating Stasi or CIA type of operations in 2026. It makes you feel real cool and neat to perpetrate that kind of thuggery and disruptive buffoonery in 2026. It's a shame. It really is a shame. Eventually, the U.S. Department of I believe the U.S. Department of War, ladies and gentlemen, is going to step in, and they're going to have to. It's going to have to be the Department of War to step in and do something about this. Ladies and gentlemen, and I could just get 1 second. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, I like to puff tobacco while I do a lecture. And ladies and gentlemen, now is the time. So if you would please bear with me while I grab some tobacco. We will continue with the lecture as scheduled. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, mind you, stalkers, gang stalkers, they're very proud. They're very proud of what they do. They're very proud of what they do. They really think they have society by the very hairs on its head. All right? They think they have society in a chokehold, ladies and gentlemen, and they think that they can essentially perpetrate any crime without anything that resembles a legal process. And I know I got detractors, ladies and gentlemen, but they're silent detractors. They're detractors that would rather talk about what I do behind closed doors as opposed to my face, because they don't want their cover blown. And that's okay. I mean, you could talk about gang stalking or any political topic however you choose. Just know of a surety that such a program has no place in a civilized world. And even secret government, even clandestine government mechanisms that are implemented by governments around the world have protocols, have procedures, have guidelines, instructions, and directions. Gang stalking is just a wild, wild west of disruptions, and it's very deleterious. And quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not the only one talking about it. There's a lot of people talking about it. And it's one of those things that has the potential to cause some embarrassment. And I realize that that's one reason why you're not hearing a lot about it on the national level. But that's okay, because ladies and gentlemen, it's something that can't be ignored. It's something that simply cannot be ignored. And because it can't be ignored, it needs to be talked about in a way that is certainly educational, ladies and gentlemen. Educational indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about founding principles versus future realities, Me personally, I'm going to use every resource at my disposal to continue talking about this program, as is my right to do. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a situation where I offer no apologies for what I do. Okay, these are self-defense tactics that I'm using, and it's being powered by the World Wide Web, by the internet, by the information superhighway. It's being powered by artificial intelligence. Okay, when you talk about foundational principles, the founding principles of this country, we're talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, being able to pursue happiness to your liking within the confines of constitutional rights, freedoms, and liberties, as well as the overarching legal documents that constitute this country. And ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, I think that that American society lacks a status quo right now. And the reason it lacks a status quo is because you have some people that define patriotism as simply going along with whatever your country is doing. All right? Whatever decision your country makes, that's the right decision to you. Okay? Then you have other people like myself who, if I see something that is not exactly on par with constitutional rights and liberties, and not just constitutional rights and liberties, but human rights, okay, which are looked at the international level by the United Nations. As far as I can tell, the United Nations has not publicly remarked on clandestine gang stalking, because I don't think members of the United Nations have realized the status quo yet. Okay, what's considered the right side of this debate as to gang stalking's importance, and who's on the wrong side of the debate? That has not been created yet. This program, this enterprise, this conglomerate, this project called clandestine gang stalking is sort of just floating around freely. And no one knows exactly what side they're on, because they don't know what the status quo is. They don't know what it's socially acceptable to believe about gang stalking. Now, unfortunately, the accepted mechanism, or rather the accepted train of thought concerning clandestine gang stalking is one of anyone who thinks that they're being pursued or tampered with in any way by society in packs of strangers that approach them and wreak havoc in various ways is a psycho, is a demented schizophrenic lunatic, and they deserve to get locked up in an insane asylum so they can no longer talk about gang stalking. That's part of the population control element that gang stalking brings. Okay? There are people who practice gang stalking that believe every targeted individual who comes forward about it must be defective, and therefore they should be either thrown in prison or thrown in an insane asylum. That's population control. Okay? Population control, ladies and gentlemen, is not just about exterminating a segment of the population. It's a combination of things. It's stopping a segment of the population from reproducing. It's stopping a segment of the population from finding and maintaining employment. It's stopping a segment of the population from finding an education. Okay, it's stopping a segment of the population from earning a credential. It's stopping a segment of the population from attaining their constitutional rights. You see, population control is not just about eradication of a people. It's about the marginalization of a people equally. All right. Now, if I were to say I want to stop a segment of the population from reproducing, how do I do that? Let's say I don't want people who fit this characteristic or that characteristic, or people who have that kind of personality or this kind of personality, or people who have those kind of proclivities or these kind of proclivities. How do I stop people like that from reproducing so that their genetic material does not pass down from generation to generation? How do I do that? Well, you can't unless you restrict that person's access to the resources that they need to reproduce. So let's say there's a personality type, okay, that I, as a member of the national security apparatus in this country, don't want to see reproduce. Well, the way to do that is to stop that particular person or people like that person from obtaining employment. Okay, because if you don't have the resources to care for a family or raise a family, then chances are you won't have a family. You won't reproduce. You see? So restrict job opportunities or institute something like workplace mobbing, which is a hallmark and a central component of clandestine gang stalking. If people who are targeted individuals have been deemed as deleterious or reckless to society, we can stop that person from reproducing another reckless person if we restrict that person's job opportunities. So let's stop that target from working. Then that target won't have the resources to raise a family or reproduce. You see? So it's population control in a very sly, very slick, very underhanded manner. Okay? It's not like what you've seen dictators do throughout history, or emperors or kings who have attempted to control populations by either exterminating people or forcing deportations. That's another form of population control. Forced deportations. If there's a segment of the population that you don't want to see reproduce, if there's a segment of the population that you don't think deserves to be in this country, if there's a segment of the population that you think is deleterious or dangerous to society, you can force that demographic to leave. And there have been a number of emperors, kings, and even presidents throughout history, particularly over the past 500 years, that have done forced deportations of mass quantities of people. That's a form of population control. You have your ideal population, and you want to see that ideal population thrive, even at the expense of the people in that country that you don't think should thrive. So that's part of what gang stalking is. Part of it is making sure that one segment of the population or a kind of personality type gets to thrive, and then other segments of the population or other personality types are marginalized. You see? So apparently at some point in my teenage years, it was determined that my personality type is one that should not thrive or continue. So I was put in a gang stalking campaign to try and restrict my opportunities, particularly those opportunities that would allow for reproduction or the furtherance of progeny, typically because I don't know, maybe I was seen as a defective person, and any of my offspring would be defective. So it's a lot more sinister than just trying to provoke a person or harass a person or make sick a person or damage a person's reputation or anything like that. It's about a future war. It's about a future war, a silent war, a hidden war, a covert war, where certain types of people will not exist at all. Okay, and you do that through the restriction of the reproductive mechanism. And it's a situation where when you talk about extermination, or when you talk about the elimination of an entire people, it's costly. It's costly. I mean, when the American Indian War ended, well, not necessarily when it ended, but probably about 150 years before it ended, there was an attempt to exterminate the Native American Indians. And there were federally commissioned army units that essentially rode around in on horseback looking for Indian villages to raid and or destroy. And but I mean, that's just the kind of war that was. That was a war of elimination. The Native American Indians wanted to exterminate the settlers. You see, the Native American Indians didn't want the settlers in their land reproducing and claiming America as their own, so a war was fought. And quite frankly, the settlers won. And the trophy was America. And I'm not one of the people that bash the settlers. I'm not one of the people that bash the settlers. I'm not one of those people that says, the American Indians were cheated out of their land. I'm not one of those people that says, well, the American Indians got a raw deal. Okay, I'm not one of those people at all. A legitimate war was fought over this land. It was fought between Native American Indians and American settlers, and the settlers won that 300-year war fair and square. Okay, that's something that I will say. But that was an actual war that was fought using military strategies and resources. Covert war or clandestine gang stalking is not fought in that same way. It's a hidden, covert, and unseen war where segments of the population are targeted by other segments of the population using state resources and guidance. And it's a shame that a country whose founding principles consist of constitutional principles, all right, the principles of inalienable rights, okay, those rights that are afforded to you by God or nature, those rights that no man, woman, child, company, or government could ever legally or lawfully infringe upon. The kinds of founding principles that empower a people. All right, those principles have been forsaken in the interest of clandestine gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen. And quite frankly, it's an ugly program. It's an ugly program because it is hidden in nature. All right, it's an ugly program because it has the power and the capacity to disrupt or even destroy the trajectory of a person's life. It's a mechanism that has not been voted upon by Congress. It's not a mechanism that has gone before the Supreme Court. It's not a mechanism that has gone before the office of the President of the United States. It's not a mechanism that has gone to the ballots. It's not a mechanism that is being discussed in city council meetings. It's not a mechanism that's being discussed in state legislatures. It's not even a mechanism that's being discussed in barbershops all around this country or even college classrooms because it's too contentious. The goal is to see who would thrive in such an environment and who would fail in such an environment. And it's also meant to give one segment of the population an advantage over the other segment. All right, it's designed to give gang stalkers the advantage over targeted individuals. And when you look at the digital frontier, okay, there's no way that a program like this is going to stand. All right, the only honest voice that we have on gang stalking right now are the testimonies of the targeted individuals. You have artificial intelligence, and you have data on this program on the World Wide Web. Those are the only honest voices about this program that exist. Everyone else wants to diminish it. Everyone else wants to call it a delusion. Everyone else wants to call it a small problem that doesn't affect much anybody. Other people want to call it something that might be the work of God. Okay, you got some people that are saying, well, gang stalking is obviously the work of God because God is the one that intervenes in the affairs of mankind. So it's obviously the work of God. That's what some people will say. And other people will say, well, it's the work of some other deity who has come down from the cosmos to Earth and orchestrated this thing to put sinners like me, your host, E.I. Smith, in our place. And righteous people like gang stalkers are meant to thrive. You see, so there are all kinds of narratives that abound right now. You have some people that would like to attack the TI's credibility. You have some people that are willing to go even further than that. You got some people that are willing to call people who come forward about it enemies of the state. People who are willing, able, and ready to bash America at every turn. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, there are no flag burnings going on here. All right, there are no collusions with foreign entities that may have some sort of a gripe or a beef against America. We're not here to talk about any particular group as the culprit. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, any race of people, any ethnicity of people can be targeted individuals. And, it's a situation where, if you look at world conflicts, and you look at some of the skirmishes that are happening in other parts of the world, of course it takes away from the discussion in that it gives people a distraction. All right? If you look at the situation between Russia and Ukraine, that conflict was inevitable. If you look at the situation between Israel and Hamas, that conflict is inevitable. If you look at some of the conflicts involving some of the other countries in this world, those conflicts are inevitable. But they're sensationalized to keep the American consciousness away from programs like clandestine gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen. And, while I'm on the topic, when you look at conflicts, okay, controversial conflicts, all right, the kind of conflicts that make news headlines, international news headlines. For example, let's take Israel and the Hamas situation, for example. If you don't live in Israel, or if you don't live in Palestine, or if you don't live in the Middle East, your feelings about that matter are not going to be as strong as if you did. Now, as an objective person looking on that matter from the outside, I see a situation where you have two rival factions that have been battling over land for 80 years now. And you're not going to see a conclusion to the matter until that matter is ready to be resolved. And quite frankly, you have some people who say, well, I don't blame side A or B in that conflict for being aggressive because of these factors. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if someone were to kick your door in while you were asleep and terrorize your family with a bazooka, and you had weapons at your disposal, would you or would you not use those weapons against the perpetrator? Okay, that's what Israel did. Okay, now, having said that, I'm not the kind of person typically that looks at Middle Eastern affairs and goes, well, I'm going to root for Israel because of these factors, or I'm going to root for Hamas because of these factors. I'm going to look at the situation objectively and render an opinion. Okay, that's what essentially happened in October. I want to say 2024 maybe, when Hamas militants went into Israel and started massacring people. It's the same thing. You go into somebody's backyard and you terrorize them. What do you think the response is going to be? Of course, Israel is going to go all out and neutralize the threat. Okay, I don't blame Israel for neutralizing the threat. But here's what you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen. When you talk about clandestine gang stalking, all right, the threat is difficult to neutralize. The threat is difficult to neutralize because it's a decentralized threat. Okay? It's not like there's a gang stalking headquarters somewhere where you could go in and shut off their power grid and now they're out of commission. No. Gang stalking is decentralized, and it's decentralized by design. It's decentralized by design. They don't want a centralized location where a person can go and disrupt the entire program. The only way to decode the program, the only way to beat the program is philosophically and rhetorically. Okay, you have to beat it with research, you have to beat it with academic resources, and you have to use the World Wide Web. You have to use artificial intelligence. You have to use the retrieval of documents, and you have to read other TI's testimonies on what they experience. And once you come to those realizations, and once you understand those talking points, and once gang stalking starts making sense to you, then you can speak out against it uninhibited. Because if a stalker can approach you with the capacity of harming you or annoying you or disrupting you or crowding you or making you uncomfortable, and they're not physically putting their hands on you, the only thing you can do is confront them or avoid them. Okay? I've done both. I've confronted them and avoided them in various capacities and in various intervals, and they still keep coming back. That's because gang stalking is about dominance. It's not just about pestering. It's not just about inhibiting a person's ability to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. It's about dominance. There is a segment of the population here in the United States that is using state resources to dominate another segment of the population as an ego boost and as a way to cheat their way into prosperity. And typically, ladies and gentlemen, programs like this deserve the attention of every governmental auxiliary that we have, from the top down. All right, but I heard an interesting soundbite from the President of the United States recently. I heard an interesting soundbite. There was a soundbite that I heard from President Trump. I think it was probably about a month and a half to 2 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, where the president and the vice president, J.D. Vance, needed to be evacuated at an event that they were in because there was some sort of a threat outside of an active shooter, and they were evacuated according to guidelines, set forward by the Secret Service, and they were removed from harm. And it was done very professionally. It was done very quickly. It was done very effectively. It was done very well. They were very well hidden and evacuated in that situation. And then apparently there were some people who witnessed that online. I first saw the evacuation on TikTok, and the first thing that came to my mind was, wow, they really got them out of there quick. That was a job well done on behalf of the Secret Service. But other people saw that evacuation online and said, wow, that looks fake. It looks staged. And later on, probably about a week later, President Trump did a cable news interview about the evacuation. And somebody said to him, you know, there are people that think that evacuation and that whole scenario was staged. And President Trump said back to the interviewer, he said, yeah, those people are sick. Now, the president, just like any other United States citizen, has a right to an opinion. The president, just like any other citizen, has a right to freedom of speech. The president, just like any other United States citizen, has a right to an opinion. Now, my opinion on situations like that differ from the president in the sense that I don't think people that have alternative views on history are sick. Okay, we have seen numerous instances of staged events in this country to where we know it's possible. We know staged events are possible. And it doesn't even have to be a staged political event or a massive staged event. It could be a staged event in a person's individual life. You see, staged events happen, and I don't think people that express concern about them are sick or ill or mentally disturbed. So there's a lot about President Trump that I think is admirable. Okay, he continued on in his capacity as president despite an assassination attempt on his life, and he continues in his role as president unaffected by that, typically, and he still does public appearances, and he still goes to his presidential callings and his presidential responsibilities unfazed. Okay, that's admirable. And I am of the mindset that the Departments of Defense and War should follow suit. I mean, when a person assumes the office of president, the auxiliaries that the president oversees typically take on the nature and character of the president himself. So the same fortitude that Donald Trump showed by continuing on in his presidential duties, despite that horrible event in his life, I think that other governmental entities should take on similar responsibilities and show that same fortitude in the gang stalking discussion. Show the same fearlessness that President Trump has shown in executing his duties as commander-in-chief of this country. Show the same fortitude, show the same sense of personal excellence that President Trump has shown. Now let me break something down for you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? I say personal excellence despite the fact that the president has never publicly remarked on clandestine gang stalking. That's okay. Most politicians in the United States are not going to publicly remark on gang stalking without knowing what the status quo is. All right, most people are not going to publicly remark on gang stalking without knowing what the status quo is. There is no status quo. People don't know how to act. People don't know how to perceive it. People don't want to take an opinion on it without being told by the societal mechanism in this country what their opinion needs to be. People like being told what their opinion is supposed to be. People like being told what to think. People like being told what to feel. People like being told how to perceive political events. No one has officially told anyone in the United States how they're supposed to react to news that a good chunk of the American population, at least 50 million, but possibly more, have decided to loan their personal resources and abilities to a state-sanctioned organized mobbing mechanism that is on par with the Stasi's or Setsa. People have not been told by their government, by their pastor, by their community what to think yet. People don't know what the shot is. They don't know what the status quo is. They don't know what the acceptable way of thinking about gang stalking is, so they offer no opinion at all. Because they'd rather not offer an opinion than offer the wrong opinion. Me personally, I'm offering you opinions based on experience, data, and research. All right, future realities, okay, are going to monitor the present. Okay, we've all heard that quote, history will judge. You hear it a lot. History will judge, history will judge. You got some people that say, well, let's let history judge. Why should we do anything? If gang stalking ain't affecting me, if gang stalking ain't affecting my family, well, why should I care? And on top of that, history will judge. Go ahead, let it judge. You know why? They'll say because we'll be dead in 100 years. We'll be dead in 200 years anyway. Let history judge. I'm not going to care at all anyhow. That's what they'll say. Just let history judge. We don't need to solve this problem right now. Let history judge. There are people in the United States living perfectly comfortable, perfectly healthy, perfectly prosperous lives while gang stalking is afflicting their neighbor. There are people who are raising very healthy, very prosperous, very safe families in this country that has authorized a clandestine disruption mechanism and attack protocol. All right, there are people who say, you know what? As far as I can tell, the big news story in this country is the big news story in this country is what's happening with all these new laws that are being passed. You know, you got Congress people attempting to solidify laws that prescribe the death penalty for child sexual assault. You have the Strait of Hormuz situation. You have rising gas prices. You have the onset of artificial intelligence. You have the onset of national security mechanisms. You have the onset of a new generation that's coming up right now. You have the onset of a lot of things that are substitutes for conversations on the gang stalking mechanism. Now, you know, ladies and gentlemen, in the history of this country, we've had a lot of things happen of national interest that didn't get the attention that they should have gotten, and then you got other events in history that have taken place that have gotten way more attention than they should have gotten, in my estimation. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a failure to communicate at the highest reaches of government. We have a failure to communicate with the American people. Now, I want to see our elected officials succeed. Okay, there isn't a single elected official in this country that I have a personal problem with, although, and I maintain the right under the Constitution to say this, there is one official that I think knows me personally and may have attempted to harm my progress with this project. Now, this particular official that I think might be trying to harm my progress is one that has roots here in Florida. Now, ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to speak on this representative who it's a federal representative, because I don't have all of the facts yet, but it's something that I'm starting to anticipate, that this particular official has seen my work, objects to my work, particularly because of my criticisms of Cuba, and I think may have gotten with some local authorities in an attempt to derail my work. It's a suspicion that I have, and this particular federal official, has roots in Cuba. But I'm not going to say any names because, again, I don't have all of the information. But I think that this particular official doesn't like what I do. But that's okay, because I have a right under God and the Constitution to do what I do and say what I say. And quite frankly, I'm not an enemy of the state. I'm not an enemy of the presidency of this country. I'm not an enemy of the federal courts, the Supreme Court, local courts, state courts. I'm not an enemy of any governor, any congressman, or any elected official in this country. I'm an enemy of state-sanctioned thuggery. And I hope that our elected officials can eventually see how damaging this program is to the sovereignty of the United States and to the prosperity of the United States and the global community, because I suspect, but I don't know, that clandestine gang stalking has infiltrated other countries. Now, if it has, that's a matter for those other countries to deal with. But if it's something that's unique to the United States, it needs to stop. Now, if I were granted a meeting with the President of the United States, which I won't, okay, because targeted individuals have been painted as sort of a rebel faction in the United States, which is antithetical to what targeted persons are. They're just simply people who want their constitutional rights and their human rights respected. But if I were granted a 10-minute conversation with the President of the United States, what I would say is declare a state of emergency, use your emergency powers to make all forms of organized mobbing illegal and a federal crime. Then I would ask that the president get with the Supreme Court and make gang stalking unconstitutional. And then I would ask that the president notify Congress and have Congress pass bills further criminalizing gang stalking activity, and then it would go to the states as to how to enforce these new laws. And that's what I would say. And Mr. President, if you're listening, I'm glad you're well. I'm glad you're in good spirits. I'm glad you're able to execute your duties as president with the integrity and distinction that you see as fit. I would like to see this program eradicated immediately. It's dangerous, it's deleterious to American society, and it's thuggish. And I don't think that the national security apparatus of this country and the armed services apparatus of this country should be able to prosecute gang stalking campaigns against people. Because, quite frankly, it is something that could leave a horrible stain on the legacy of the United States. And that's, quite frankly, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for this country. It's not good for the citizens of this country. And I would like to see the future realities that we're talking about come to fruition in a way that is conducive to a thriving global community. When you look at gang stalking, it's not sophisticated enough to be undetected. It is very detectable and it is very observable, and it's hard to know if that's by design or not. But I do see these stalkers trying to make their signaling mechanism less observable and less detected by the targets, because word is getting out about this. It's thuggish, it's hostile, it's stupid, it's animalistic, it's unconstitutional, it's a lot of things. And quite frankly, I'm of the mindset that it puts America in more danger and not less danger than it needs to be. And if the program ceases to exist, then that puts America in a better position than if it is allowed to continue. And what I'd like to see is, in the future, I would like to see the World Wide Web play a greater role in the documentation and the eradication of such programs. Okay, I would like to see artificial intelligence play a role in the eradication of this program. We have amazing resources at our disposal with artificial intelligence, with the World Wide Web, with the information superhighway, to put this program into its proper place and to put it into its proper perspective and put gang stalkers in their proper place. These people think they're above the law. These people think they're above the Constitution. These people think they're above the Bill of Rights. These people think that they get to dictate who gets to enjoy inalienable rights and who doesn't. And ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, it's a program that allows certain segments of the population to exercise control, authority, and dictate the trajectory through life of other segments of the population. Okay, I would like to see our elected officials get together and talk about this in a way that brings the matter to its appropriate importance, its appropriate level of importance. That's important because it allows for a discussion, it allows for a conversation, it allows for a debate as to the merits of this program and its role in civil society, and that's important. It's important because if you look at the trajectory of civil rights in America, if you look at trajectory of civil rights in countries around the world, if you look at the trajectory of human rights in America, it follows a pattern, ladies and gentlemen. There are evils committed, there are wrongs committed against the American people, and the American people voice their concerns. And then laws are passed to prevent the menace from continuing. And, sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, governments get of the mindset, well, if a person doesn't like how this country is, then they could just leave. And that's also something that I've weighed too, ladies and gentlemen. I've weighed defection. All right, I've taken a psychological inventory of all the other countries that I could migrate to if I ever got the means or the resources to do so. And you have some people that like America just how it is. I'm not one of those people, but when you talk about constitutionality, when you talk about founding principles, when you talk about the rule of law, good governance, inalienable rights and these things, and you weigh them against the future realities, you have to ask yourself, what are the future realities and how are these future realities going to play out? Are the future realities going to play out in favor of the Constitution, in favor of inalienable rights? Or are these future realities going to play out in favor of a very defective, very corrupted, and very negligent national mechanism that allows for a clandestine signaling mechanism? It's really just a matter of time until those future realities manifest. If the future realities manifest in a positive way, that means we'll have a future without stalking. If they manifest in a negative way, then we'll have a future with stalking. But I would like to see the artificial intelligence mechanism, the information superhighway, the World Wide Web, the internet, play a defining role. Okay, and don't let me forget social media too. I would like to see these mechanisms play a defining role in the eradication of gang stalking and the furtherance of human rights and constitutional precepts. And I think ultimately, when you talk about state-sanctioned or covert mechanisms of thuggery, of hostility, I mean, when it's to the point where you have churches participating in clandestine gang stalking, I think it's time to have a conversation about it, because a church, for example, I oftentimes talk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its role in clandestine gang stalking in my life and in the lives of others. It's time to have a conversation on the separation of church and state, because ultimately, what it's going to come down to is this: if you can stalk, pester, harass, or attack a person in the name of Christ, then what can't you do in this country? If I can pick up a Bible or any religious book, a Book of Mormon, a Pearl of Great Price, a Doctrine and Covenants, anything that resembles a holy book, and look through that holy book and find justification to perpetrate state-sanctioned act of thuggery and criminality against my fellow Americans, that means we have a significant defect in this country. Okay, there's a sociological defect in this country. And gang stalking is the name of that defect. And it's called a lot of things. It's called organized mobbing. It's called organized stalking. It's called covert war. It's called cause stalking. It's called hate stalking. And, me personally, I've come to the realization that people can tap into your gang stalking campaign and exact revenge against you, even if it's people you haven't seen in a while. I got people that I haven't seen in 25 years, just about. All right, that was high school for me, plugging into my gang stalking campaign, causing me problems, confrontations, disruptions, and various other ills, simply because they've been plugged into it and they think that they're operating behind the scenes. So, I mean, it's almost like gang stalking not only gives you the opportunity to attack people in an undetectable fashion, because you as an outsider can plug into a gang stalking campaign and use a person's gang stalkers as a weapon against him. Okay, gang stalkers are not always acting on their own behalf. A lot of them are being directed from somewhere, and when they're being directed, they're being mobilized against a targeted person at the behest of your enemies. So it allows you to attack people from behind the scenes, but it also gives you the opportunity to be a total and complete coward behind the scenes. And that is what a lot of gang stalkers see as the that is what some gang stalkers see as the icing on the cake. You get to feel like you're above the law. You get to attack people in a clandestine fashion, and you get to do it from behind the scenes and walk away when the carnage ends. You see, it gives you an opportunity to act like a total tool, with no recourse whatsoever. When you look at the founding principles of this country, there's nothing in the Constitution that allows for gang stalking. You got some people that say, well, you know what, I want to see the Constitution rewritten so that programs like gang stalking can exist more comfortably. You know? And some people say we don't need the Constitution. We have national security laws. National security laws can trump the Constitution. National security laws can override the Constitution. National security laws can be used in place of and instead of the Constitution. So we don't need to rewrite the Constitution to make gang stalking easier to perpetrate. We could just beef up our national security laws and they'll override the Constitution. And if gang stalking is a national security mechanism, and it is, then all you have to do is make it legal on the back end, and it doesn't matter what the Constitution says. You see, we found a way to override the United States Constitution, and we found a way to make state-sanctioned pestering, harassment, and attacks legal. You know, me personally, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a reasonable man. I'm a man of humane letters. I'm a man of contemplation. I'm a man of research and documentation. I'm a man of ideas. I'm a communicative man. I'm a thoughtful man. I'm a fair man. I'm a man of compromise. I'm a man of listening. I'm a man of hearing. I'm a man of of perspective, a perceptive man, I'd be willing to talk to somebody about gang stalking if that opportunity ever presented itself. But from what it looks like, there's really no way to gauge what it is that has possessed people to engage in such a thing outside of desperation, a sense of inadequacy, and a sense of having a mandate before God to do these things. I'm sure there are Christians all across the country that participate in clandestine gang stalking that think it's of God, that God gave us this thing to help us succeed over and above other people. You know, we're the ones with the signaling mechanism. We're the ones that are on the side of the state. We're the ones that have the national security and intelligence apparatus on our side. So we must be God's chosen people, and people who are being disrupted by this thing must be the chosen people of Satan, because they're the ones dealing with all our crap. And we can find Bible verses that allow us to do what we do, right? Trying to throw God's name and the name of Christ in with this thuggery. It really is a shame. But when you talk about future realities, when you talk about the World Wide Web, the information superhighway, social media, artificial intelligence, machine learning, intensive data research being done on these matters, I mean, you're talking about the future realities of the thing. Okay, the information superhighway, the World Wide Web, these mechanisms are here to serve humanity. And I have harnessed the power of the internet to bring the good gospel of gang stalking to the entire world. And you may ask, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, what is the good gospel of gang stalking? It is this: that it has no place in civil society, it's unconstitutional, and it violates the inalienable rights of citizens. All right, now, ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes you have to fight for your rights. Sometimes a person's rights are violated. And if you're silent, they'll continue to be violated, because there are some people that don't value your rights. They value their rights, but they don't value your rights. I value my rights, so I'm going to use my First Amendment right to bring the good gospel of gang stalking to the entire world. And I'm doing so not as an enemy of the United States, but as a champion of justice. All right, there are 1,000,001 excuses that a person can give as to why they participate in a state-sanctioned signaling mechanism that causes harm to others. There's 1,000,001 excuses that can go into that, and I can find 1,000,001 reasons as to why it's unconstitutional. All right, now I got people vilifying me down here in Miami-Dade County left and right because of my political beliefs. They're trying to find reasons to criminalize my work, and they're trying to find reasons to criminalize me as a person. And they're using, it looks like state and local resources to accomplish this. And I'm keeping an eye on it too, ladies and gentlemen. Far be it from me to allow a library system to team up with a police department to criminalize me. Far be it from me to allow a church who presents itself as a Christian organization and as disciples of Jesus Christ to disrupt my path through life. Far be it from me to let a government, particularly one that claims to be a democracy and a constitutional republic, to infringe on my civil rights and liberties. Okay? I am going to stand up for myself using the power of the internet and using my First Amendment rights until the matter is resolved. And even when the matter is resolved, I'm still going to continue to voice my opinion on political matters to ensure that these matters stay in the past. Thank you for tuning in.